In the arcades, there was maybe no genre that required a defter balance for success than sports games. Most of the profitable sports titles of the early arcade era were basically just regular arcade action games set on green grass. But by the 90s, games were growing more sophisticated, and it would take more than a couple of pixels and a whistle to make a hit. In this new era, basically no sports game connected with audiences quite like 1993's NBA Jam. Expanding on the over-the-top conceit Midway had developed with 1989's basketball game Arch Rivals, NBA Jam got the actual NBA rosters and recognizable digitized sprites of the real players, and slotted them into a cartoonish, fast-paced 2-on-2 battle where players were superheroes who could jump 70 feet in the air for dunks, and do it so forcefully that the ball could burst into flames. It very quickly became a beloved, massive hit, and ports of it and its expanded Tournament Edition were big sellers on console as well. Weirdly, shortly thereafter, in one of those legal situations that everybody involved remembers, but no two people seem to have the same answer as to why it happened, Midway Games lost the rights to the NBA Jam name. So when they created a direct sequel, it ended up being called NBA Hangtime. But in every other way, it was identical, down to the 2D sprites, which led to it being one of very few games to be released on both the Super Nintendo and the Nintendo 64. The company that won the rights to the NBA Jam name was Acclaim, who put out their own sequel, NBA Jam Extreme, a few months later, sporting shiny, new 3D polygonal graphics that, in what has become a recurring theme on this project, have aged much worse than the 2D sprites that came before, and in fact makes the game run distractingly slow compared to the frenetic pace of NBA Jam. Also, in a funny detail, NBA Jam Extreme used Juwan Howard, then of the Washington Bullets, on motion capture for every single player. So if you've ever wanted a game where every player in the NBA plays exactly like a half-speed Juwan Howard, have I got a game for you. Meanwhile, Midway, NBA Jam's original architects, were putting together their own 3D successor, which they called NBA SHOWTIME, NBA on NBC, and had it slathered in National Broadcasting Corporation branding, including the heavy use of NBC's famed basketball theme, Roundball Rock, which I tell you because you will absolutely not be hearing it on this video, because I'd like to be able to keep the video up for you to actually watch. But trust me, you hear it constantly during menu screens. The 3D is much more crisp and fluid than the one seen in NBA Jam Extreme, but the actual character models are, well, the intro to every match played sees the players bound onto the scene, looking like puppies that have specifically been bred for aesthetic value, and as a result have massive health problems and won't be living long. Look at these monstrosities! How does Nick Van Exel even lift that noggin? I recently said on the NBA 2K episode that the basic definition between a good basketball game and a bad one is how naturally the shooting feels. Well, the shooting in NBA SHOWTIME, befitting a casually designed arcade game, is real generous, almost to a fault. The gameplay is fluid, and the shooting window is very forgiving, and most of the time, unless you're way out of range, it's gonna go down. The shot mechanics function just like they do in NBA Jam. The pace is frenetic, just like in NBA Jam, and the soundtrack is all designed to be quite reminiscent of the original game. Reviews of both NBA Hangtime and NBA SHOWTIME basically settled on that same fundamental point. These games play exactly like NBA Jam, from the jump shots, to the passing, to the dunks, to the steals. And how good or bad that is just depends on what you want from a new basketball game. On the NFL Blitz 2000 episode, I talked about how much I loved that game growing up, but unexpectedly found it thin and messy on replay decades later. I will always cherish NBA Jam, just as I will always cherish NFL Blitz. But it's 30 years old at this point. and stems from a much simpler era. And while my memories remain, my esteem for actually sitting down and playing its basic gameplay long-term in 2023 only goes so far. These were games I liked as a little kid in the 16-bit era, when I didn't like sports. As I grew, and my fondness for actual sports grew, sports games became more and more complex, and I found my tastes hewing closer to the complexities of basketball simulation, rather than the more repetitive appeal of arcade-style sports games. And while NBA Jam will always have my heart, I basically have no need for any subsequent updates that offer the exact same charms, especially from a later era when games were getting more elaborate. If these simple, fast-paced, you score and then they score and then you score and then they score rhythms are what you're looking for, NBA Showtime moves briskly and plays well for its aims. But for me, personally, this limited gameplay has long passed into the realm of nostalgia. And for me, NBA Showtime quickly became a profoundly short-term pleasure. Next time, are you ready to get extreme, I guess?